He walked into the courtroom wearing an oversized suit, head down, hands trembling. To everyone watching, he was just another troubled black teen, another name to file away in the system. The judge smirked. The officers whispered. They thought they knew exactly how this story would end. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. In the next few minutes, this so-called hopeless case would shatter their assumptions and expose a truth they weren't ready to face. The question is, how many others never get that chance? Tyler Carter wasn't the kind of kid anyone expected to see in a courtroom. At 17, his world revolved around late-night study sessions, part-time shift at the corner store, and stacks of library books taller than he was. He'd grown up in a small apartment with his mom, a public defender who taught him that knowledge could be a weapon and that some battles were worth fighting, even when the odds looked impossible. But on a humid summer afternoon, Tyler's world shifted. A routine trip to grab snacks turned into flashing lights, rough hands, and accusations that made no sense. By the time he sat in the holding cell, the story had already been written for him. A story shaped by the color of his skin, not the truth. Still, Tyler wasn't panicking, because unlike most kids in his position, he knew exactly how the system worked and exactly how to dismantle it. The morning of his hearing felt like walking into a storm he'd been warned about his whole life. The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood, but beneath it was something colder, something Tyler had felt the second he was led inside in handcuffs. In the hallway, officers leaned casually against the walls, their laughter too loud, their eyes fixed on him as if he were already guilty. The prosecutor walked past without a word, flipping through a thin folder Tyler knew was supposed to be his life story. He could almost see the labels they'd stuck to him. Black, young, poor, trouble. When the judge finally entered, Tyler caught the smirk, a small curl of the lip that said he'd seen this before and knew exactly how it would end. That look was worse than anger. It was dismissal. The charges sounded ridiculous when spoken out loud. Grand theft auto, evading arrest. But the officer's report painted him as a reckless kid caught in a chase through the city. A kid in a red hoodie, something Tyler hadn't worn in weeks. That detail burned in his mind, but no one seemed interested in hearing it. He remembered the arrest like a photograph burned into his memory. He'd been walking out of the 7-Eleven with a soda and candy when the police cruiser pulled up. No questions, no explanation, just a shove against the wall, the zip of the cuffs, and the voice telling him he fit the description. In that moment, Tyler knew the truth didn't matter, at least not to them. Now, sitting in the defendant's chair, he could feel the weight of every stare in the room. The court reporter barely looked at him. The jurors avoided his eyes. It was as if they'd all silently agreed on who he was before a single word had been spoken. But Tyler had something they didn't expect. Knowledge. Years of watching his mother dismantle false accusations in court had taught him the cracks to look for, the ways to catch a lie without raising your voice. As the officer began testifying, Tyler felt his pulse slow instead of race. He was listening for the slip, the inconsistency, the one thread he could pull to unravel the whole thing. And then there it was, a single sentence that didn't match what Tyler knew to be true. It wasn't just a detail, it was the first domino. He tightened his grip on the table, fighting to keep his face neutral. Because once he started pulling that thread, there'd be no going back. The officer's testimony rolled on, smooth, confident, practiced. To anyone else, it might have sounded airtight. But to Tyler, it was riddled with openings. And then the moment came. And that's when I saw the defendant, wearing a red hoodie, sprinting from the stolen BMW. The officer said, nodding firmly. Tyler's pulse sharpened. Red hoodie. Again. He took a slow breath and rose to his feet. Every head in the courtroom turned. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. A defendant speaking up during testimony. He asked the judge for permission to pose a question. The room stilled. Permission granted. Tyler's voice didn't shake. Officer, are you certain about what I was wearing that day? The smirk came instantly. Absolutely. Red hoodie. Like always. That's when Tyler unfolded the paper in his hands. Grainy security camera stills from the 7-Eleven. The timestamp burned bright. 20 minutes before the alleged chase. The boy in the photo wasn't in a red hoodie. He was in a plain white t-shirt, handing cash to the cashier with soda in his other hand. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The officer's eyes flicked to the judge, then back to the photo, his confidence draining in real time. Tyler didn't stop. He reached into his pocket again, pulling out a single business card. His hand was steady as he placed it on the evidence table. Vanessa Carter, Chief Public Defender. The prosecutor froze. The judge leaned forward, peering over his glasses. The entire energy of the room shifted, the weight of years of assumptions cracking under the truth. For the first time that day, Tyler allowed himself the smallest smile. The game had just changed. The judge's tone shifted. The smirk was gone, replaced by a measured silence that carried more weight than words. The prosecutor mumbled about needing to review the evidence. But everyone in the room knew the case had just unraveled. Within minutes, the charges were dismissed. Tyler walked out of that courtroom without the record they'd been ready to stamp on him for life. But he didn't walk out untouched. The sting of every laugh, every dismissive glance, every assumption, it lingered. Because while he had proof, knowledge, and the courage to fight back, he knew most kids in his position never got that chance. In the weeks that followed, people told him he was lucky, but luck had nothing to do with it. What saved him wasn't chance. It was preparation, and a mother who had armed him with the tools to stand his ground. The system hadn't been in his favor. It had simply failed to crush him this time. And that's the truth that gnawed at him. For every Tyler Carter who walks free, there are countless others whose stories end with conviction, a cell, or worse, without ever being heard. Racism in the courtroom isn't always shouted. Sometimes it's a quiet assumption, a smirk, a case that's over before it begins. So here's the question. How many more futures will be decided before we demand a system that listens before it labels? Share this story, because the next Tyler might not have a law library in his backpack, and their truth might never see the light of day.